This week on Quality Digest Live, we chat with Robert Preville, founder of new industry website designed to foster collaboration.
Plus, do you have auditor phobia? If so, we'll help you overcome it when we come back.
Today's sponsor of Quality Digest Live is BSI America. Quality versus quantity, BSI's comprehensive quality management solutions can help your organization achieve both. Visit bsiamerica.com to get started today.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for June 29th, 2012. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richman. We're going to kick the show off this week with the news of the week, starting with a new book co-authored by frequent Quality Digest contributor Mark Graban. Graban's new book, called Healthcare Kaizen, which he co-authored with Joseph E. Schwartz, is published by Productivity Press. The book was made available just 2 days ago, and I have a galley copy right here, right there. There it is, yes. Okay, Kaizen, of course, as we all know, is a Japanese word for continuous improvement. And if there's an industry for which CI should be the primary focus, of course, healthcare, I think, would probably pretty much be it.
Absolutely.
Definitely. We've seen the healthcare sector make some great strides in recent years in adopting lean practices, and that can be seen in several ways, not the least of which is the many hospitals which have received the Baldrige Award in the last decade. There's been many of those. The great thing about this book is that it doesn't just theorize about performance improvement in healthcare settings. There's dozens of practical, real-life examples in this book right here again, including charts and graphs, explanations, detailed explanations. You'll come to understand exactly why these changes are important and how they came about at these organizations. And you'll see the benefits too. So if you're seeking to undertake a Kaizen initiative at your organization, either within or outside of the healthcare field, this book will provide a valuable resource to you. So even better, we're going to be talking to Mark Graban about his work in Healthcare Kaizen on the show next week. So if you have an interest in the topic, you'll want to circle your calendar and be sure to tune in then. For more information on the story in the book, including details on how to order it, check out the story link just below the player page right there.
And also, this actually is going to be a pretty timely conversation we're going to have with Mark next week. The Affordable Care Act was just okayed by the Supreme Court, said it was legal. And one of the stipulations of the Affordable Care Act is that hospitals and healthcare institutions reduce their administrative costs. And I'm sure Mark Graban will have some interesting tidbits on maybe how Kaizen and Lean will actually go towards furthering that need.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So another interesting story we had this week was one by Timothy Bednarz. Now, Timothy Bednarz is a frequent contributor to us, and I like him because even though he's not one of our more widely read authors, he does have a lot to say about management, and this week was interesting. Learning to channel conflict in teams. Now, in his article, Bednarz talks about team conflict and how you don't want to avoid it. You know, we create teams in order to tackle difficult issues, but one of the things that happens is that the solutions that the teams come up with result in changes that often disrupt the status quo as well as our personal agendas. And so there's a natural tendency for individual team members to want to have disagreements with that change and to want to avoid that change. And so conflict comes up. So the main challenge, says Bednarz, is that when leading teams, you have to allow personalities, talents, qualities, and insights to emerge rather than put a damper on any conflict. You have to learn how to actively harness these differences. So Bednarz is saying that conflict should not be seen as something to be resolved, but as an experience to be explored. Opposing views, says Bednarz, have to have great value when you see them as different parts of the same story. And I think that's interesting, is what he's saying is that conflict is something that you really want to, in a sense, you want to embrace because you're learning something else about how people view the change that you're trying to put into the workplace. And if you don't have that conflict, if you don't have people disagreeing, no matter how vehemently they may disagree, if you're not hearing that point of view, you're not getting the full story on what's going on. So rather than something that must be overcome, leaders should understand that resistance deserves respect for its ability to help teams discover how to change. And this is an interesting quote from Bednar's. Quotes, "Resistance is a mobilization of energy. Learn how to channel it in positive ways. View resistance as a healthy and creative force that can be applied to effectively meet individual challenges." End quote. So, to me, the value of this whole article by Bednar's was that I'm one of these people who really I don't like conflict in the workplace. I want it to be, I just want it to go away. And he's saying, no. He says you need this conflict. You need to hear it. You can't let it get out of hand. I mean, conflict has got to be managed, but it doesn't want to be quashed. Right. You want to have people feel free to have their opinions out there, even if they're disagreeable opinions. They got to know that it's okay to put it out there. Your job as a manager is to learn how to channel that energy that's coming out of that.
Right, because if you don't, it's going to manifest itself in a bad way.
Sure.
If you can uncover these things beforehand, and you can get to the root of why the resistance is there, you can overcome it, or maybe you need to address it in some other way. But if you don't, if you just pretend it doesn't there, it'll come out in passive-aggressive ways, and it'll crop up anyway. So you have to really confront it.
Right. He speaks about that. He says, one of the problems that, like you said, one of the problems that happens is if you quash conflict, the conflict still exists. It's just not on the surface. Mm-hmm. So instead, it's kind of boiling up inside, and what may happen is either passive-aggressive behavior, mm-hmm. or it may just boil over into an explosion, which is way out of proportion to what the original conflict was. But it's festered inside. You know how that works. I mean, You let things boil, you let things churn inside, you don't discuss them, the problem becomes bigger internally than it really is, and then it just erupts. Right. So if it's out on the surface, if people feel comfortable discussing conflict, then you're actually accomplishing two problems. One, you're diffusing a situation, and number two, you're hearing opposing viewpoints, which is valuable in any organization.
Right. It's all about collaboration.
It's collaboration. You got it.
Great. Well, thanks, Dirk, and of course, thank you, Timothy Bednars, for some wise and practical advice, as always, from Tim. And since we're talking about collaboration, let's continue on in that vein. Our first of our feature articles this week concerned a piece that appeared in actually last Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. IndustryPigeon launches Trade Network for Industry Trade Professionals. Okay, so what is IndustryPigeon, you may ask? You may ask, all of you may ask. Well, IndustryPigeon is a social trade network that integrates networking and collaboration tools with practical business applications. IndustryPigeon connects people in trade communities and facilitates their day-to-day workflow. The site enables coworkers, partners, technical sales reps, and marketers to develop personal relationships and discover new contacts, products, and services. So it's a way to really get that collaboration going.
Right, and we'll talk about this, but it's really almost kind of an amalgamation of all the best tools from Facebook, LinkedIn, and so forth. I mean, but with an industry focus, and I think we're going to hear about that in just a second.
We will. To find out more about IndustryPigeon and how it can help industry professionals do their jobs better, we're joined now by the company's president and CEO, Robert Preville. Robert, are you with us?
I am. How are you?
All right, we're doing great. Thank you for joining us today and talking about IP, IndustryPigeon. Let's start with a little bit of background. Tell us about IndustryPigeon and why you started it.
Sure. Well, I'm a mechanical engineer by education and have been involved in a number of startups in the industrial space. Most recently, Global Test Supply, which I started about 7 years ago, grew it and recently sold it. We were an industrial distributor of electronic test and measurement instrumentation, metrology equipment and instrumentation. And we were managing relationships with dozens of vendors in our supply chain. Our ability to deliver timely customer service to our customer base was highly dependent upon our ability to get information back from our manufacturers. And as it turns out, despite rather sophisticated software running businesses behind the scenes, it was a very manual process for us to aggregate that information from our vendors and deliver it to our customers. So a light bulb went off and IndustryPigeon was born, and the idea was to take the best in breed of social networking functionality and build a collaborative platform that makes sense for business, that would allow businesses to not only manage communication and collaboration internally, but more importantly with the extended enterprise.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you brought up some of the other social media sites that we talked about, LinkedIn and Facebook. We have actually the site up on our screen share now. We want to kind of show it to the audience and let you, Robert, maybe help us understand a little bit about how this was constructed, what it's intended to do, and some of the functionality in terms of collaboration that IP, that IndustryPigeon can bring to the industry.
Sure. So IndustryPigeon is really focused on three areas: meeting people in your industry and the trade that you work in, sharing and collaborating with the people that you connect with online, and then building in workflow and practical business applications to facilitate some level of transaction and or initiate commerce. So,
well, if we can look on, Daniel, if we can put this up on the screen share here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, so this is one way you can collaborate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what you're looking at there is the Pigeon Post activity stream. Similar to Facebook and LinkedIn, IndustryPigeon has an activity stream, which we think is a very effective means of communicating, much more efficient than, say, email or voicemail.
And so
what you can do here is if you click on the Who Are You Working With pull down, your contacts on IndustryPigeon are grouped by the relationship types that you have with them in business, your customers, your vendors, your colleagues.
So for instance, I have a colleague here, so I could add Belinda. This is going to be adding Belinda to my conversation, is that right?
That's absolutely correct.
And then I say I also have you, so I could add you to the conversation. So this means any communication going forward, this is going to be just between the three of us then?
That's correct. It's a secure and private conference room style conversation.
And then if I just want to communicate with them, I would just, kind of similar to Facebook, I would just write whatever I want to write down here, and this is going to send basically post a message to all of these people, right?
That's correct. And similar to Facebook, you can also share website information, product data, upload files and attachments, and rich media like video.
And now the users will get an email. It'll tie into their Outlook or whatever other email platform they're using, and they'll get the message through that format as well, correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Matter of fact, IndustryPigeon is fully integrated with email such that if you get the notification of the message by email and you reply using Outlook or your iPhone or whatever email client that you use, that reply will automatically get attached to the conversation on IndustryPigeon without you ever having to log in.
One thing that our users are always really concerned about, of course, is best practices. We talk about best practices as a thing, as a procedure, protocol. If you're doing something right, you want to share it across your enterprise, and you want to share it with people that you work with. So, how does IndustryPigeon help people communicate with some of these rich media formats, perhaps, to share best practices?
Well, so Derek, you had mentioned Timothy's book on friction, and I think, in my experience, one of the primary reasons or causes of friction has to do with miscommunication or inaccurate communication. And when you have multiple people, not only within the same company, but across your supply chain collaborating on a particular customer order or a particular engineering design project, miscommunication is inevitable. IndustryPigeon brings everybody into the fold in one place, where people that maybe aren't active in the conversation but want to monitor the conversation so that they can precipitate potential problems that other people might not be aware of. So I think what we're really doing here is streamlining communication in the extended enterprise, and I think in any quality process that has to be inherent.
I want to go back to something you mentioned a few moments ago, and that's the issue of security. And this is a big one, obviously, for anybody who works in a new media and online media environment. Talk about some of the security protocols that you've established, and how people can feel comfortable safely sharing some of these important documents. Some of these documents are certainly proprietary, and people need to know that the information that they're sharing on IndustryPigeon is safe. How do you address that?
Sure. So security really breaks down to two areas for us. One area is the functionality and how the interface works. Knowing who's on the conversation at all times should make you feel comfortable that your conversations are secure. There's no generic status updates whereby your communication goes out to who knows who. The other part of security for us has to do with the technical side of that. And this is a web-based cloud service application. And we can take advantage of various encryption techniques that are not available with more traditional vehicles like email or primarily email. So the ability to be able to have a conversation that's encrypted will prevent some savvy programmer from stealing that conversation off the internet and being able to decipher it.
Now, Robert, I think one thing you may have touched on, and I just want to elaborate just a little bit, is part of what happens when you're creating a profile and so forth is you're actually delineating what industry and sub-industry you are in, right? So that basically you're going to be collaborating or could collaborate with people that make sense for you to collaborate with. They're all within your industry or related industries. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. We are introducing the concept of the industry graph. So the analogy to Facebook would be Facebook created the social graph, whereby you connect with people based upon who you know and then based upon who they know. Well, in IndustryPigeon, the first thing you do as a new user is you follow. We have a built-in database of industry categories, and it's a taxonomy, so those categories relate to each other, and you follow your technical trade. So, for example, maybe you're following oscilloscopes, or maybe you're following CMM machines. And based upon the industries that you follow and how they relate to other industries and who's following those other industries, we can then present connection opportunities that make logical sense, similar to the way that you're going to meet people when you go to a trade show where the common theme is your industry.
Well, Robert, we're wrapping it up here, but before we go, and again, remind everyone out there, the website, www.industrypigeon.com is the site we're talking about with Robert Preville, the president and CEO. So, Robert, what's next? What does the future hold for IndustryPigeon, and where are you looking to take this here in the near to mid future?
Well, we are in the process of finishing our public beta, continuing to improve functionality. We're in the process of marketing IndustryPigeon so that we can drive users in. The more users in IndustryPigeon, the more value any particular user is going to get. And we hope it becomes the de facto standard by which companies would want to collaborate with their internally as well as with their extended enterprise. And it's a great tool to manage issues with your customers and your vendors and your reps and anybody that you do business with.
Okay, well, thanks, Robert. That's been Robert Preville, President and CEO of IndustryPigeon, a new social media, social networking site for industry professionals. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Talk to you soon. Great stuff.
Great stuff.
Okay.
Okay. Our next article was from one of our more popular authors, Miriam Boudreau. Mm-hmm. Miriam writes on ISO 9001 issues, auditing issues, kind of the ins and outs of ISO 9001. And in this particular topic, she takes on the issue of challenging, or at least not being afraid of, your auditor, whether this is an internal auditor or an external auditor. So she says, sometimes it's hard to explain why you took a certain approach to an ISO requirement. For example, supplier reevaluations. You might remember discussing the requirement during the implementation phase and deciding that filling out a short form would make more sense than filling out a long form because you have a small company. And in general, your suppliers are not critical or sole suppliers. So your auditor comes up. Now the auditor's in front of you, and the auditor asks you why your short form is so short, and suggesting that maybe you're missing valuable information. Well, what should you do? Just because your auditor is questioning you does not mean what you're doing is wrong.
I know what most people do in that case. They cave.
They cave, exactly, and that's, she talks about this, like, so you're in front of your auditor suggests that maybe what you're doing is wrong, and your immediate response is, oh, okay, well, gosh, I guess I better fix it.
Yeah, right.
And she's going, wait a minute, if you think what you're doing is right, then just explain to the auditor your rationale for taking the approach that you took. I mean, if you think you're right, it's okay to say that. Remember, you know why you're doing what you're doing. The auditor doesn't, so you have to explain it, and that's okay. It's okay to tell your auditor, I think you're misinterpreting this, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
It's all part of the process.
Right.
That's what the process is all about, is that give and take. It should be, at least, and it's not in many cases, unfortunately, but it should be a give and take, and the auditor's job should be to want to uncover the way that you go through these processes. Right.
And most of the time that's the case, because most auditors, I mean, look, it's just one of those things, the auditor is often the bad guy. But the truth of it is, the auditor really is there, in a sense, to help you. They're going to look at your organization, they're looking for what's right. But every now and then, you may come across, and we've heard of them, auditors who are so narrow-minded that they think that there is only one good way to accomplish any ISO requirement, and it's that way. So, their way, I should say. So, although you should always consider, your auditor's critiques, you got to take them seriously. You don't have to give in. If you think you're right, stand your ground, explain your approach, and know that as long as you're complying with the intent of the standard and that you're continually improving, you're correct. Challenge the auditor if you think it's necessary. If the auditor is right, don't worry, they're going to point out to you why they think they're right. They're going to look at the standard, they're going to say, look, here is what the standard says, here's why I think you're out of compliance with the standard, here's what I think you need to do. Don't worry, they'll point it out to you. If they can't do that, by the way, then there's something wrong. And also, Miriam doesn't touch on this, remember, if you strongly disagree with your auditor, it is okay to go back to the registrar, who the auditor works for, and tell the registrar, wait a minute, I think our auditor is out to lunch.
Right.
And honestly, I want you to send a different auditor because I don't think this one knows what they're talking about.
Right.
I mean, it's okay to do that.
Sure.
And you've got to.
Again, it's part of the process. All right, now let's turn to one of my favorite game shows. Who wants to be an auditee?
Yeah, nobody.
Who wants to be an auditee? Nobody. But in this version of Who Wants to be an Auditee, there is an option to phone a friend.
Phone a friend.
That's right, and Miriam talks about that.
Right. What she's talking about when she says phone a friend, she says, okay, so an auditor comes to you and says, okay, I think you're doing something wrong. Or an auditor asks you, explain this process. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, well, let me get some more information and I'll get back to you on it. So she gives the example, say the auditor asks you a question regarding the validation of process for product and service provision. And you're going,
right.
Don't fake it. Don't pretend that you know what the heck the auditor is saying. Don't try to fudge around it. Just say, I don't know. Let me call in somebody who does. Call in a friend. Call in a colleague. Call in your ISO consultant. That consultant knows, more than likely, and you probably have a consultant.
And it may very well be that particular provision, that protocol that was referenced, is called something else. You may be doing it perfectly adequately according to the spirit of the document, but you may call it Special Process 14. Who knows?
Right. The auditor's calling it one thing,
and you're calling it another. Yeah. You say, "Oh, sure, Special Process 14." Well, let's.
And if you ask somebody else, they might say, "Oh, yeah, that's all they're talking about. Don't worry about it."
Right.
So, kind of her whole point is just because you can't explain something doesn't mean someone else can't. So it's okay to call in somebody else. You're not an expert in everything, so say so. Bring in a person who does. Upshot, Boudreaux says, next time you find yourself in the middle of a tough question, calmly and politely tell the auditor that you will do some research and get back to him. As long as you can demonstrate proficiency in your own procedures and your procedures align with the ISO standard, you're going to be just fine.
You're fine.
Don't be afraid of the auditor. Don't be afraid of the audit. And stand your ground if you think you need to.
Don't be afraid of the process.
Right.
We're process-oriented people. This is a process like any of the processes, and it's meant to uncover, not necessarily to find fault, but it's meant to uncover what you're actually doing. And sure, I mean, the best option always is going to be to tell the truth. Don't ever, the worst thing you can ever do is fudge it. If you fudge it and you say, well, sure, we did this way.
And the auditor's going to smell blood.
It right away. And that's what gets people in trouble 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
So, be upfront, tell them what's going on, tell them why you did it, and if you don't know, say that. I don't know. I'm going to find out for you. I'm going to phone the appropriate person, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. So, good article.
Yeah.
I always like reading
Miriam. She's very down to earth, very common sense.
Very down to earth, very common sense, and this is an area that a lot of you out there are dealing with on a regular basis. So these are articles that always get very well read from you. So thanks for that. Okay, great. Well, Miriam Boudreaux, thanks. And now we're going to go to Tech Corner. Interesting Tech Corner this week, and it's one that we actually taped a few weeks back at Hexagon's Think Forward 2012 show.
That's right. Actually, today's Tech Corner is from the Hexagon 2012 show that we were at in Las Vegas just a few weeks ago. And we had a chance to look at a lot of different equipment up close, including this very interesting piece of equipment. This is the Leica Absolute Tracker AT401. And let's roll that video. Hi, we're here with Chris Junt of Hexagon Metrology to look at the Leica Absolute Tracker AT401. Chris, tell us about the Leica Absolute Tracker.
Well, thank you, Dirk. The AT401 was released about a year and a half ago, and the goal of this product was for maximum portability. And what we've done is the tracker weighs 16 pounds, the controller weighs 2 pounds. It goes into one case when you travel with it, and I travel with it a lot. Go on an Embraer regional jet, go on an Airbus A320, Boeing 737, put it in the stow bin right above me when I'm on the flight, get off, and when I go to my job, I can use it right away.
Nice portable.
That's a big plus. Yep. The other part of it for portability is you can see here with the unit, I'm actually running off a battery. So it's the only laser tracker that will actually function on battery power only. So we have a battery that's in the sensor itself, and we have a battery that's in the controller. The batteries will last for 4 to 6 hours in heavy use, and you can actually hot swap this battery, and you can really take about 10 seconds to swap the battery in this controller as well. So you don't need to have AC power, although you can use the unit off of AC power as well. We have a sensor cable running between the two, and it just so happens right now for communication, you can communicate to the laptop via a LAN connection or a Cat5 cable, but this is also a laser tracker that you can communicate Wi-Fi. So right now we're talking to my laptop via Wi-Fi to the system itself, which becomes really handy if you're in a manufacturing plant and you're out there with the laptop and moving the tracker around. You don't have any cables to worry about during that process.
Okay.
The unit is, a couple things about it. The unit has different drives than most laser trackers have. So it has piezoelectric drives, which is kind of nice because if you have multiple targets set up out to take measurements, I can actually go in and move the tracker to a position, let's say, and I can lock onto a target without having to disable any motors. Most trackers, you'd have to disable the motors to point and shoot it and then re-engage the motors. Not necessary here. The other function it has is Leica has a technology called power lock. Power lock is such as if I go in and break the beam, you can see that it's flashing red or it'll turn blue. It'll lock on within a field of view of 10 degrees wherever that target is. Okay. So if you're in a plant, and someone comes and walks by and you're walking between some posts in the plants, it can pretty much follow an SMR by all those objects, and that's unique to us.
So it does some sort of object recognition, knows what the SMR shape is like?
Yeah, it really sees like an infrared pulse coming off of an SMR.
Okay.
And this is brighter than anything else within that field of view. And as long as it's within that 10-degree conical field of view,
it'll reacquire.
It'll lock on. Okay. So the thing that's also unique about this tracker is it is the longest ranging laser tracker on the market. So it'll range out 160 meters radially. So essentially you can measure something that was almost 320 meters in diameter with the system. So being out that far away, you don't really want somebody to break the beam and then you have to go looking for it. You want the tracker to try to acquire as best as it can. Something that's also unique to it is the top will come off. So this tracker, you can spin it. There's no stops in both axes for the horizontal and vertical axes. And what's nice is that you can actually track over the top of the tracker. So you're not limited by just a little bit of range of motion. You can actually go over the top of the tracker. The other thing that would be somewhat unique to this system, it has a dual tilt compensator in the tracker as well. So a lot of my customers in the aerospace industry or even in the contract services business, they're asked to come out and level up this machine, put in these rails and make sure that they're level. Well, people used to use, let's say, a Leica DNA03 for the level portion, and then they would use a laser tracker for the XYZ position measurement, right? Well, this so happens is that you can do both within one setup, so it's a big time saver. And the performance of the level is more like the Leica Geosystems products. It performs much better than the levels that are available today in laser trackers.
Okay. So Chris, was there anything you want to show us in terms of software or anything like that, or is basically just an overview of the hardware?
It will actually run off of PCNemus, which is our core software, but we also have third-party softwares that people can use this with as well. So we, Spatial Analyzer, Verisurf, Polyworks, you name it. Those are softwares that will run this very easily. Okay.
Well, Chris, thanks for showing us the Leica Absolute Tracker AT401.
Thank you.
Was I wearing the same shirt?
I think you were, yes.
Need to buy some more shirts.
Well, there you have it.
Need to wash a shirt now and then.
Yeah.
That was the Leica Absolute Tracker AT401. By the way, if you want to see a full 1 hour long aerospace demonstration of the Leica AT401, we did one Technology Live
2010?
2010, down
Yep.
in Southern California at an aerospace company down there. If you want to find that, it's actually a really interesting Technology Live. Just go to our website. In the upper right corner, you have a search box. Just type in Leica AT401 video, and that should be right at the top of the search results. So,
as we discovered in that Technology Live, you can pour
water right on top of that thing. There's the punchline at the very end. There, just gave it away. Spoiler.
Sorry. Great
That's
stuff.
all right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Dirk. Thanks, Hexagon. We had a good time out there. Really great show.
Yeah.
Hexagon 2012, Think Forward in Vegas. We had a good time. Okay. Well, that's our show, Dirk, as we know, for the week. And that's it. But before we close, I'd like to thank our sponsor, BSI America. As customer sophistication grows, commitment to quality is key to business success. As the world's longest running standards organization, BSI's comprehensive quality management suite is 100 years in the making. It's why Fortune 500 companies and small businesses alike trust their quality management system to BSI. Visit bsiamerica.com to get started today. You can also access the BSI website by clicking on the banner ad just below, or if you're watching this on demand, just to the right and below the player page right there.
That's right. Well, looking ahead, we've got one of the big events on our calendar coming up pretty quickly, the CMSC 2012 in New Orleans, July 16th through the 20th. This show is always a great show. It's a show on close tolerance, portable coordinate metrology solutions. It also includes cutting-edge white paper presentations. This year, it has all that and more. So for the first time, the CMSC is offering a careers fair for those interested in metrology jobs. The first ever CMSC Careers Fair starts at 10 a.m. on Thursday, July 19th at the Roosevelt Ballroom in New Orleans, Roosevelt Hotel. To find out more, just click on the link below the player page. So if you're interested in metrology, always wondered what it wanted to be about, well, come to New Orleans.
Come out to New Orleans. It's going to be beautiful.
In the middle of July.
It's going to be wonderful.
You'll love it.
We'll love it. It's beautiful. New Orleans is one of my favorite towns. Hey,
it is. It's a cool place.
It's a great town. If you've never been to New Orleans, it's a great opportunity to go out at any time. It's going to be great. All right. So we'll see you there.
100% humidity. Okay.
It'll be fun.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Really.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today on this episode of Quality Digest Live. Thank you to Robert Preville of IndustryPigeon for joining us and talking to us about that and all of the articles we covered. Thanks to those contributors for giving them to us, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Next week, of course, 4th of July.
Happy July 4th.
Enjoy your holiday. We'll see you Monday on the 2nd with another week of Quality Digest Daily coverage, so tune in then and see us then.
So long.
Thanks. Bye.
Auditor.